next concept we are going to talk about is called the stateful set. Okay, stateful set is something. Imagine you are bringing up a pods which should share a relationship between them. Like for example, if I'm having my MySQL, okay. So in any database, you can have one write master. You can create multiple read masters, right? Multiple databases in the active scenario. There will be one active server which should be able to write data into the actual data store. The other servers or other active servers can act as a read option. So it can provide data to the other services which are consuming it, but it cannot have it cannot allow to write, because that is how the database are designed. So there will be one data store in that only one application can write, but other applications can come and read the data from that particular. So this is where the stateful set comes into picture, where I can have a cluster of MySQL servers, that is MySQL pods. In that, I will have one service which will be acting as a write service. The other services will be acting as a read service. Okay, so we will see that how I'm going to bring it up. Okay, so for that, first let me create a config map. In the config map, I am going to create the configuration file for the primary and replica servers, because I'm going to create one master and do that. So let me create one config map, which is going to have the primary configuration file and the secondary configuration file. So let's do that first. So add SS config map .yml. I'm going to bring up a stateful config map for my stateful set. So let's use that. Let me copy paste the existing config map. So this is the config map. So the API version is v1, kind as config map. So I'm going to create a config map with the name MySQL, and the data will be, there will be two entries. One is primary.conf. This will have this option, and for the replica, it will be a super read only. So this is what I'm going to provide in the config map. So let's create the config map first. File, save, kubectl, apply -f. This is config map. Okay, let me share this with you guys. Let me check the config map on the dashboard. See this is my config map. So there is a MySQL config map created with two entries: primary.cnf, replica.cnf. Okay. So the next thing I'm going to create is, I'm going to create a service . So I'm just going to create services. So let me create a add MySQL service.yml. So here I'm going to create a service without any cluster IP, not even internal service. This is basically for my DNS entries for my stateful set members. Okay. So when I talk about stateful set members, so I'm going to have it like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? 0 is going to represent the master and others are going to act as a read replicas. So whenever I want to write any data, I should call it like MySQL-0.MySQL. Okay. Others, I can call it as MySQL read. So that's what I'm going to write it here. This YAML is going to create one stable DNS entry for the write master, that is MySQL-0. Others will have with the name MySQL-read. Okay. So let's do that. So kubectl apply-f MySQL service.yaml. So there are two services it is going to create. It is a 3 replica stateful set I'm going to bring in. In that, the first container which is going to come. So it will try to bring up 3 pods like MySQL-0, MySQL-1, MySQL-2. Okay. So MySQL-0 is going to act as a write master, and MySQL 1 and 2 will be act as a read replicas. Okay. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create the stateful set. So MySQL stateful set.yml. Also, I'm going to copy paste. I don't want to type everything. Let me walk you through. Okay. Here, adding to the MySQL, I need to run an additional container, which will be basically replicating the data between the database, right? So whenever I want to have a data replication happening, okay, so I should have one master where any data written into that particular data should be replicated to the other database service also. Okay, so let's see what is happening here. So I'm going to create a API version apps v1, and it is going to be a stateful set. So these are all the name of the stateful set is MySQL, and my specs. So this is where the specs for the stateful set, and it is going to match the template app MySQL. And for this MySQL, I'm going to use the service name as MySQL. Okay, and it should have 3 replicas. Okay, and I'm going to create the template. So in the template, I'm going to bring a init SQL container. Okay, so I'm going to bring up the init containers, which is going to ensure that the server is coming up to the requested need. Okay, so the name of the init container is init-MySQL, and I'm going to use MySQL 5.7. Okay, and there I'm going to say if my pod name is equal to 0. Okay, so generate MySQL server ID from the pod original index. So I'm just going to generate a pod ID. So when I bring a 3 replica set, the first pod will be 0 and the next 2 pod will be 1 and 2. Okay. So if this ID is 0, then I need to map the primary configuration file, because in the config map, I have created 2 configuration file that I should use the primary.cnf when the server ID is equal to 0, because that is going to be my write master. And If it is going to be other than 0, it will map the replica configuration file. So this is what I'm doing here. Okay, and then I'm writing the ID base rematch ID to the server id.config value. Okay, and then I'm going to mount the mount config map D, right? And this is where I'm going to mount it. So this is the first init container. Based on the container ID, it is going to set whether it is the primary or the replica. Okay. The next init container, I'm going to bring it called the clone MySQL. So basically, I need to map the data or replicate the data from one database to another. I'm going to use the tool called Extra Backup. This is a Google provided sample tool, okay, which can ensure that, okay, whatever data written on one database can be replicated. Okay, so first it is going to see whether skip the clone if the data is already exist. Okay, and it is going to check whether from which server I need to receive the data. Okay, so clone data from previous year. Okay, if it is 0, it will exit, or otherwise it will continue. Okay, and then it will prepare the backup. Okay, and there it is going to mount the varlib MySQL data and the configuration file. Okay, so these are only two init containers, one to copy the correct configuration file to the server and another to do the data backup. And the next is my actual MySQL container. So where I'm going to add two data maps, one for my MySQL and another for my configuration. Okay, there I'm going to restrict the CPU and memory. And then liveliness probe. Okay, it should try to ping this domain name. It will actually ping that. So this is where we are going to see the liveness probe. So it is going to check whether the MySQL is responding for the ping. Okay, and this is the initial delay seconds and other steps. And next one is the readiness probe. That means it will execute this command, okay, and see whether it is responding to that. So basically, it's going to run a MySQL query, okay, and try to see is there any entry on the database. If it is going to return solid, what do you call it? Sorry. If it is going to return the correct value, no errors, then the container is ready. If it is not returning anything, the container is not yet ready. So this is what the readiness probe. And these are all the configuration for the readiness probe and liveness probe. So after how many seconds I should start the test? So it should wait for 5 seconds, then only it should start the testing. And what is the period? So it should run every 2 seconds. And what is the timeout? It should return within 1 second. The request should return the data within 1 second. Okay. Then it is going to bring up the extra backup container where it will be running the script to sync the data. Okay. It uses a log mapping. Okay. Log file shipping concept. So the log file will be shipped and then it will be added. So this is the command. There also I'm adding the volume for data and other steps. And then next is the volume claim will be created for this. So let us run this stateful set and see what's happening. So I'm bringing up a stateful set with 2 init containers and 2 set of containers. One is my actual MySQL and the extra backup to back up the data. So to replicate the data. Let's apply this. Okay. While applying that, let me also watch how it is coming up. So kubectl line SQL stateful set.yaml. Let me run this command to see how this is coming up. So if you see this, it is bringing up three containers. One is MySQL 0, 1 and 2, where 0 is going to be my write master and 1 and 2 are going to be my read masters. And data between these containers will be replicated by my extra backup pod, which is like basically I'm bringing up two containers in one pod. Okay. One container will be my MySQL and another container will be my extra backup, which is responsible for replicating the data between the containers. That's what it is coming up. Let's give it some time. By the meantime, you can use this. Let me share this with you. Once you run the apply command, run this watch command to see how it is coming up. I think I got 3, 2 out of 2. That means all my containers came up. So I should be good. If you go to my pods, yeah, I can see MySQL 0, 1, 2, and this will be my write master. In that I have two containers. One is my MySQL and another is my extra backup. So here the volume is getting provision. You see, there are 3 volumes for 3 of my database. That is also done. So let me know once your pods are up, then what we'll do, we will write it on the master and see whether we are able to get the messages from my replicas. As I told, MySQL-0 is going to be my write master. And for the read, I have created a service. I'll try to get that from the service. Then the stateful set is up. So you just need to see MySQL 0 should be 2 out of 2, 1 should be 2 out of 2, and 2 should be 2 out of 2. And once it is done, press Ctrl C to come back to the prompt.